Very often, the excuses are worse than the deeds, or the lack of deeds themselves. And one of the things that happened was that when Ali was caliph, there were some who merely avoided swearing allegiance. And because that's all they were doing, they weren't forced to. It wasn't like they were a conquered army or whatever. In my country also, there was a riot. I think multiple riots, but very specifically something that happened January of 2017 that was encouraged by some politicians, and then for the entirety of that guy's presidency, people are like, oh, not my president, not my president, but no reason to think that he wasn't the lawful president. But was it forced that they would, affirm someone that they didn't vote for? No. Now, I know America isn't an Islamic state, but, the example drives home. It's like, as long as you have some sort of allegiance to the state, or you're not expressing rebellion against the state, it should be fine. So those who actually rioted in the streets and stuff like this, that's not fine. And the politicians and journalists and all that other stuff that encourage them, no, that's not fine. You need to say, you need to respect law enforcement and the state officials and the rule of law. You're working towards peace. In Islam, we actually literally go towards peace, even with our wars. That's the point. And we shouldn't wait till a crisis of any sort reaches a serious point. We should address it while it's still along the way. And whether you win or lose in material terms in the way of gambling, that, of course, gains victory over the person who does it. Because, of course, that develops some mentality and stuff in society that builds up towards some stuff. I know of people who gamble rather than take care of bills, and they figure, well, they're surviving, but, something's wrong with their house or their car or something, and it's like, well, no, I have to gamble. It's like, no, you can skip it this month or totally or whatever. And now people are spending more money driving off to gamble than they are on the actual gambling themselves, but that, of course, is an expense towards that. And so we need to give up our thoughts on consuming just to consume. That's not what we're here for. And we need to situate ourselves in such a way that whatever naturally comes to us, of course, it's natural for all animals to move about and work, you could say, for their living as much as they can. People in the past, hopefully not so much nowadays, they kind of might realize that people who are disabled or elderly or whatever, you shouldn't collect welfare just because you're elderly either. Social Security is welfare. But those people, they need to work to survive. They need to figure out pricing of food and all that other stuff. They need to garden and make other things stretch their money. There might be clothes to repair rather than buying new clothes. They might have to figure out how to So it's not a worthless existence, even when you're kept from work, you could say. I mean, some people are bedridden or whatever, and one of the things is that women have their rights. Once they are of the age of the truth, and they get that ability to make action on their own, they're responsible for refusing, they're responsible for affirming, they're responsible for their own property. Now, their marriage rights and all that stuff. A lot of societies might want to make people wait till they're 18. Islam denies that thing. If nothing's wrong with you mentally in your adolescence, and 15 as a male or 13 as a female, you're given your rights. And of course, when it comes to somebody taking care of you, we find in the Quran this idea of, you can't squander the rights, the property of orphans because you want a particular lifestyle. If you're taking care of rich orphans, you might still want to live poor. If you have to give up your job or something to do that, then maybe that sort of salary might be accepted. But, these people who get rich off of taking care of orphans, being their guardians, and nothing left by the time they get older, that's just not right. And it's better, to leave as much as their stuff as possible, because there is the right of children, pre-adolescents. Nowadays, some adolescents, because some sort of mental thing, because of the bad diet or whatever. And women, there's a responsibility of, their relations, and then the state, if that's not taken care of, to provide their needs. Sort of defeats a lot of the fight for feminism, and it's like, well, comparatively, in my country, women get paid more. If you include the amount of physical work done and issues of overtime and asking for raises and stuff like this, if you compare what's going on, women tend to get paid more for the same job. And a head of state should use every rightful means at their disposal to spread Islam. And that is going beyond just implementing the punishments, fighting to defend the land and the freedom and stuff. And a leader of a state would have helpers. And a leader of a state should move about before deciding where they're going to settle. And they should, of course, encourage one who takes action and is careful to the point of being silent when it comes to speaking. And should leave things open towards explanation. I myself, one of the things that I do is I say stuff and it makes sense to me. And I'm not trying to be confusing or whatever. There's some ellipses and some other things in my speech that to me, it doesn't register so much because I look at it and say, well, I can understand it. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to convey my understanding in a way that I would understand it. And sometimes I don't know how that's going to be understood to others. And likewise, sometimes some of the sayings that you see in religious tradition, you're going to need more about it. Very often you're going to need a story or whatever about what actually happened. Like Rita Salahin, one of the problems is you get some, and some other books, whether they're about something or they're a recompilation, they might give you the wrong idea because they're quoting a sentence rather than the event. Like, for example, the Quran, we have this limiting of the forbidden things. Now, and of course, we're told that if there is something wrong in terms of you need to survive or you're being forced to do something, then you don't worry about that. And so the 5 things were the intoxicants. Some of the early community knew about coffee and the caffeinated teas and even included that. And we know that that hurts your ability to pay attention and stay still in the prayer. Some other aspects of your mental and physical health are affected by that. So by definition, caffeine is definitely an intoxicant, and you shouldn't use it internally in any large quantity as would be contained in something recognized as a caffeinated product. I mean, either added or, comes with caffeine. And then by that analogy, the Islamic law, same thing with alcohol. You can't cook away the alcohol or dilute away the alcoholic factor and still say it's lawful at that point. So I think maybe decaffeinated would also be included amongst that. And then, of course, we have things killed in the name of other than God. You can't kill it in the name of Tyson or whatever. It has to be killed in the name of God. Now, this can be done in different languages. If people say Bashmalha or something else in Aramaic or Hebrew or something like that, you can do that. If it's a non-angel worshipping Zoroastrian thing, you can do that. So and there's the very dirty, very foul. That's not just the swine, but it definitely includes the swine. It includes meat-eating animals and stuff like this, except those of the sea and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of rules of the Jews and stuff like this, and the Jewish communities that accepted Islam kind of carried over. Islam doesn't require a lot of these things. So you do want to look at what's actually poisonous or whatever, but there's not this absolute rule where you can't eat frog or you can't eat whatever. And of course, so the birds and the things with the claws and the fangs and the talons and that sort of thing, you don't eat that. So no snake and no alligator and all that. But what do you say? Because alligators are more or less a water creature. Anyways, so you want to look at why people have that opinion and choose based on why, not what's going to be allowed to you. There's the carrion, of course. And also in terms of that is that which is killed in the non-Islamic way. You can hunt and try to kill well. You can slaughter, but you don't run animals off the cliffs, and you don't break necks and electrocute and stun and drug and a lot of things that people like to do nowadays. And you don't eat the parts where the blood is pulled. There will be times when a head of an actual Islamic State or a community will gather around the leader without there being trouble. A lot of people confuse the idea of Islamic State with something you see in the news and some gang running down, capturing slaves and all that stuff. Islam was never part of wars for slaves. They fought wars and some slaves could happen, but it was never slave raids or anything like that. Never caravan raiders or whatever. If the people who owned the property and they took it from the Muslims and all that other stuff. So it wasn't, we saw that money could be made from, no, that's, But people could look at a couple sentences here and there and make these sorts of conclusions. That's why the Quran doesn't have anything like that. Nothing is left unexplained in the Quran in such a way that you just wouldn't understand it if you know the Arabic involved. And as far as giving, we need to give while we're alive and have the opportunity and all that other stuff, and don't demean the giving that you could do. And sometimes people will say something of bad faith, and then they'll immediately deal with the consequences of it. There was an incident when Jafar as-Sadiq faced Caliph Mansur, and he swore that he was outside of God's might and power, and he had an attack when he couldn't move immediately following that. And the purpose of the leadership, whether it's in the spiritual community or the political community, the point is to bring in people's rights and to address the evil in society, and not, people try to pretend that some of this is along the lines of, well, Sharia is forcing every bit. No, actually, there's less things forced than a typical state. It's only those things that hurt people, and if you keep some vices to yourselves, even if they're serious ones like drinking or fornicating, then it's kind of left alone. It's only when it becomes a public problem or somebody wants to actually deal with their issue. And so, and saying the peaceful greetings, that is how to establish things in society. It's like, what does hello even mean? It's just a sound that opens a conversation. What does some of this other stuff mean? It's like, what does it do? Why? Why? And the unification of the Muslim and Islamic State isn't that there isn't differences of opinion, different material and psychological culture that the whole thing can be applied to. It isn't even a us versus them. Oh, somebody's legally Muslim versus those who aren't, and therefore, no, other people have representation, either as protected or permitted people. As we learn in Surah 4 of Al-Quran, nobody is punished for apostasy. We find that nobody is punished for blasphemy either. Now, you certainly separate yourself from such actions, and you might shun such people or something like that, but there's no, they don't beat you or kill you or whatever. You can look at what the Quran actually says on those things rather than what one hears. Oh, they killed a blasphemer or disbeliever or apostate. Yeah, but what else did the person do? Like literally some of these news companies, we don't have an Islamic State. Pakistan has a couple items that if they were followed, they would turn into an Islamic State, but they're not followed. They haven't been followed. What the 1940s, 1950s, they've never tried to implement those two elements of their constitution. I can't really quote them right. I don't know the language, but but it's something about humans having legislative, not really having legislative authority, more of a delegative authority. Legislative authority is sort of limited to like traffic laws or something like that. And the other is something about there not being there's not supposed to be allowed any contradiction between the laws of the land and the laws of God. So there's that. But you often find that these people that are so-called facing punishment or whatever for blasphemy, it's like, what did they really do? Oh, they robbed people, they damaged property. Oh, if you blaspheme by damaging property, okay, yeah, that's totally different. If you apostatize and you're guilty of a rape and they execute you, I mean, come on, you're not being killed for apostasy or something like that. Or people look at conduct in K-Bar, that had nothing to do with what ethnic group these people were from or what religion they claimed. There never was one Judaism as far as we know. As soon as Judaism appeared, it had different forms in different areas. It's part of why the Bible was a comparison, because the religious tradition that's at a base of Judaism, there was variation with that, but that's different. We can think of reasons why we abstain from sin and falsehood. Certainly, truth gives us certain strength and control over ourselves. Even if it appears that someone's guilty, in Islam we don't have the vigilante killings or any of that sort of stuff, so the state needs to prove it beyond doubt. And sexual immorality is, not engaging that protects health, it protects family relationships, it protects the lineage and the mentality and stuff like this. Theft, again, by encouraging charity and doing good works, aside from that, with your money, or just doing what's lawful, and reminding people the difference between needs and wants, that works a lot better with society. And of course, if you allow some, it can definitely come back on you. Like in a neighborhood where you can buy stolen goods, but you don't want your own stuff stolen, you're gonna throw a fit or whatever. If that's the case, it's like, no, you don't. You don't just wait till somebody is selling something of yours and you attempt to beat them or something like that. I mean, legally that's probably not going to work for you, but or intoxicants, even so-called moderate intoxication use, causes damage over time. It can cause serious issues in the short term. Even the difference between, I've known people that they can't even drink coffee without going to jail. I mean, maybe not every time, but it's going to factor in. Let alone when it comes to a serious intoxicant. More people, tobacco or something like that. But yeah, but one of the things about all this stuff is that you look at it and say, yes, we can look for reasons to give us faith, but we got to start on a grounds of having the belief that this is transmitted to us, and we believe this is transmitted to us in regards with what God wants, what God has revealed and inspired his prophet of the age with, and therefore, we're going to do this or not do this. We're going to accept this or not accept this. We're going to have these beliefs, but we're going to hold back on having some beliefs and stuff like that. One of the things that is the claim about Emma is they would withhold judgment on a matter unless they could form their connections to Al-Quran and Sunnah, or Hadith, you could say. Of course, Sunnah and Hadith are words that have been misused. Pretty much everything that people talk bad about Islam is because it's Sunnah or Hadith. But who's Sunnah? Who's Hadith? Is it something that happened after Muhammad? So it's not required on us at the very least? Is it something that's not supported by Islam? Like the issue of God creating nothing in vain. So, isn't creating in vain the idea that it's like the whole purpose of parts of healthy anatomy is to trim them? That doesn't make any sense. You trim your hair, but that's different. And there's the verse. Well, there's multiple verses, but the following is a verse that reminds us of why the legal punishments are there, which of course are rather limited, theft and murder and violent crime and that sort of, and treason and stuff like this. That's what's addressed by the state, not, it's not the morality police, you could say. أولئك الذين اشتروا الضلالة بالهدى والعذاب بالمغفرة فما أصبرهم على النار. We remember that we find security from retaliation and all that in the law and its safety and all that. Now, I guess I have the listing was off here because this verse talks about how little do they seem to fear the fire. Some people have taken error for guidance, and it's in the context of people changing to spiritual. Oh, okay. It's a nearby verse. It's 178 that talks about the law of retaliation in terms of murder and killing, and the person who's guilty needs to be, they are the ones that need to face the consequences. Okay, there was a misprint of what verse I was supposed to look up. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykumul qisasu fil qatlil hurru bil hurri wal amdu bil amdi wal untha bil untha فمن نفع له من أخيه شيء فاتبع بالمعروف وأداء إليه بإحسان ذلك تخفيف من ربكم ورحمة فمن اعتدى بعد ذلك فله عذاب أليم. So, in that context, the point remains the same, right? Is that, this is what God has ordained, and this is what we should be encouraging society towards establishing. That they don't try to change the law or do the other things. Like, I think vigilante killings are like an all-time high in my country, both number and percentage. Um, there used to be death penalties for all sorts of things that were just going too far. Now, some of it seemed okay in the Wild Wild West, that sort of mentality, um, or rural America when pretty much everything was rural. Um, but it doesn't have the universal importance. That's why it was interesting that Islam changed some things that didn't have to be changed for a while. A lot of things still worked, but Islam in this day and age, it was always Islam by different titles. Idea, at its root, what is Mazdagasnahe, Zarathustra, um, Mazdagasnian, whatever, whichever language term you're gonna call it, Knon Sotost, and whatever you're gonna call, um, Baknachurwa, um, yoga, tantra, whatever term you'd have for it. Islam was the way, but certain laws were different at different times. Certainly, people were commanded to use the plants, and here's this particular time of the solar year, even where we're going to do something, and so some things have changed towards an international age. And let us remember that when it comes to jihad, it's not just something where we get out the sword or some weapon and force people to convert. We're not allowed to force people to convert in Islam. So what do? We teach. We set a good example. We do what is right, even when it's difficult. That's jihad in peace of the law. The greater jihad is living a life where you do what is right, even when it's difficult. You stay on the truth, even when people want you to do something otherwise. And Hajj helps establish an idea of worldly community. It shows something. Now people say, well, Karbala is a bigger pilgrimage than the ones that the Prophet encouraged. And it's like, that's not the point. The point is what God has prescribed. And if you look at the verses, there's some symbolic stuff happening. Fasting is beyond what people know. Do people really know that you didn't violate the fast in one of the three things unless they've witnessed it? And with everything, it's, you got your intentions.